welcome to the webinar today. I'm just going to step in and welcome all of you real fast. AP automation webinar today. We're going to be talking a little bit about kind of a checklist for a 2022 rebound that we're all excited for and all expecting. Anytime during the presentation, go ahead and drop your question in there, and I'll make sure that it gets to the right person, and we'll get that answered for you towards the end. But without further ado, I want to introduce you to Shannon Kreps, the VP of Marketing here at Medius. She's an expert in this field and super excited to even myself learn a little bit today. And then also introduce you to Anil Kumar. He's the Senior Director at Changepond. So they are going to take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Casey. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Anil and I are excited to chat with you about the kind of things we should be thinking about for a 2022 rebound here. And we want to start by just kind of letting you know what we're going to be covering. We want to talk about really what's on the top of a mind of a CFO today. What are the kind of things that they are thinking about on how they're going to really move forward? We want to focus today on AP automation. So we're going to break down what we see as 3 key elements of AP automation and how we can help you do that better. And then all of this is part of really an overall digital transformation strategy that most organizations are moving forward with. So how does this fit in and how can we help? So I'm going to start with, I wanted to kind of take a step back and let you know that last year at Medius, we actually conducted a survey between procurement and finance professionals, and we had 400 people globally participate. We had 200 in the US and 200 in the UK. They were broken evenly between finance and procurement professionals, and all of the respondents were at the manager, director, or C-level and above. And what we really wanted to talk about was the disconnect that sometimes exists between procurement and finance. We often think of them as you have procurement people that go out and negotiate these contracts and place all of these orders, and AP is just supposed to pay it and make it all happen. We all think it should be a smooth and seamless process. But when there's a disconnect between the two sides of an organization, it actually leads to some huge problems. And those problems really fall along the lines of missed payment opportunities for suppliers. And part of our survey was understanding what were the real impacts that COVID had or that you saw during COVID and what was going on. And I know we're all kind of tired of talking about COVID, but I think it's interesting to think about some of the things that occurred when the organizations weren't working together. And we found that in one case, or actually in several cases, at least 61% of our respondents at least once had suppliers withhold goods or services due to late invoice payments. So that means they are not able to either follow on and work that they need to do or get information out to their customers because suppliers were holding on to information because a payment wasn't going out on time. And then at least 39% of people also had occasions where suppliers were actually reducing or stopping discounts entirely due to late payments on invoices. So again, you can think procurement can do a lot to negotiate these things for your organization, but if the processes aren't smooth between procurement and AP, this can really lead to some huge issues. And for me, the biggest finding in here was that we had 24% of people in finance actually reported this knock-on effect of customers canceling orders due to inaccurate or delays in paying suppliers. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, this is when the back office really starts to have an impact on the front office. And we can sometimes think in the back office, we're just doing things day to day to get things up and running, make things happen. But when what you're doing starts to impact the sales of your organization and the revenue coming in, it's where you really start to have issues. So we want to actually look and see how can we address that today, and how can we examine our lives in light of how things have changed. I like to think 2020 for me was a lot about trying to figure out how in my personal life, how to maintain a global role that I had while working from home. I had kids running around. I had a husband sharing an office with me. It wasn't always easy, but at the same time, I had to keep showing up, making sure my organization was doing well. And that's what CFOs have been doing for all of last year. It was, how can I maintain liquidity? How can I make sure that I've got money coming in, that I can secure, that my cash is going out in a reasonable fashion, that I'm paying key suppliers to make sure that my business can keep running. Well, now that we've moved into 2021 and we're starting to see a bit of a light coming out of this tunnel, now that we've done that and we made it through last year, for organizations who have achieved, that are still here, that have actually found in many cases their businesses grow because they're providing a service that is actually crucial to an organization, how can they take advantage of that and actually leapfrog some of those initiatives that might have always been on the back burner because you were the back office, and really find a way to make digital transformation an important part of your strategy? And one of the main things that we always learn is that efficiency is key. When we're talking about digital transformation, when people talk about technologies like artificial intelligence, or break that down into things like machine learning or robotics, they're not talking about these technologies for the sake of technologies. They're talking about them because they need to become more efficient, they need to save money for their organization, and ultimately they need to increase revenue for their organization. So from a CFO perspective, that's about efficiencies and really removing bottlenecks that are here. So we find that really there are three key areas within the AP automation space that we can really start to increase our efficiencies. And questions, three areas that we find CFOs are really asking about are, well, should I consider electronic invoicing? And when I think about electronic invoicing, like, what does that really mean? We're going to break that down into some key components about what those parts of electronic invoicing are, because it doesn't just mean shooting an invoice through some electrons into outer space and into your system. It really has several key parts that need to be thought through and addressed. Part of that as well is using a specialized solution versus a workflow automation solution. We know many organizations actually have workflow tools in place. They can be great when they're generic, but should I be using one of those generic solutions I have, or should I look at a specialized solution that can exist for me? And then a big one that I think we're seeing more and more come to light, especially in the last few years, are the last mile here, which is payables, and actually the payments aspect of that. We do such a good job with procurement negotiating things, AP getting information into the system, getting things approved and ready to pay, and then having that fall down at the last minute due to some kind of issue of getting approved information posted and ready to pay in an orderly fashion, that can be what really kills us. And that's actually, what we saw within the research we did in terms of late payments really having an impact on the organization. So the way to actually handle that, and what we're going to talk about today, is really breaking that down into these three key components. The first is intelligent invoice capture. So what does that really mean? Getting invoices into my system effectively. Then once they're in my system, it's really about efficient AP automation. So getting it from point A to point B, from invoice in to actually getting it ready to pay. And then finally, it is that seamless payables enablement. So again, how can we ensure that if something is ready to pay, it goes through directly and I don't have to worry about what's next in many cases? So let's start with intelligent invoice capture. And again, I like to think of this as really two components. It's about looking at electronic invoices, and it's looking at capture. When capture is really what information is coming in to my system and how. And what I really love is we work with Ardent Partners. We've sponsored their State of ePayables report in 2021. Happy to send you a copy of it if you're interested. Please let us know. But this to me was a really great quote that they had, which is, for AP to achieve its main goals and objectives, it must eliminate the enemy paper invoices. Manual tasks and paper-based processes, slow invoice processing, limit data intelligence, increase the risk of fraud and payment errors, and reduce the chances for early payment discounts. So it kind of in like these single two sentences, they've really encapsulated all the issues that happen with paper that we are aware of and know about. So I think it's really good to talk about here, and we're going to go into this in detail. What I think is funny is sometimes we need a third-party expert to actually talk about this, when in reality, we know that this is something that's important that we should talk about and should be thinking about all the time. So let's kick it off with invoice submission into AP. Well, we all know that invoice submission has many forms. I like to think I actually started my career a long time ago, 27 years ago. I was a buyer and a purchasing department somewhere. And I used to walk over to the accounts payable department when we were trying to solve our issues, and there were stacks and stacks of paper. There were people responsible for just opening up envelopes, scanning content in, and filing it. And I say, paper invoices, boo, like we should be done with paper invoices. But it is still a way that we find, especially a lot of organizations that are growing, are still dealing with paper invoices. And we know all the troubles that those entail, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. The way that we're seeing more people that come to us that want to deal with invoice solutions are really having more PDFs attached to emails. So those can be automated from their own accounts receivable system, or there are people that are sending emails automatically with PDFs attached. It's great when a system can take those emails, automate it, and then bring them into your system. But I will be honest, I still work with many people where they're still starting out, where they're downloading the PDF. They are, in some cases, even printing them out and scanning them. So PDFs attached to emails is a great way to kind of start electronic, but it's still, it has some manual components, especially if there is some scanning involved. We're talking about OCR, or optical character recognition, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. Another one that people often ask us is, can you handle PO flip, or can I use invoice submission through a portal? And the answer is yes, those are things that we can do at Medius and we can help you out with. But that really is almost for like the long tail of supplier. Those are for usually smaller suppliers who might not be automating this process on their own. In those cases, when that happens, there's still a process of a supplier has to upload an invoice, or go to your portal, upload the invoice, attach it, have it go. Or in the case of a PO flip, find the purchase order, say that that's the number of items or goods or services that have been delivered, and send it off. Any supplier that is working with their own AR system is probably unlikely to do that, but it is a way of getting invoices into your system. And usually those are more correct, especially in the case of a PO flip, because it's exactly what you've asked for. Then there are things like EDI and XML. And we've been talking about EDI and XML for decades now, actually, in terms of electronic transmission of these invoices. Although we still find that they can be complicated if suppliers still aren't putting things in the format that you need. And then, of course, there are networks. So being able to connect from your supplier connecting to a network and having your invoice provider being able to get back to that network is key as well. So these are all different ways that invoices can be sent electronically to your system. But I want to take a minute and talk about OCR, because people will often, say, well, tell me about OCR and how that works for you. But with OCR, we actually find that there's still a lot of time spent with an administrator to optimize and maintain templates. So when you're saying, the invoice number could be here or the supplier name is there, if you're constantly having to manually amend and update that, that can be very time consuming. So much so that you end up having a full-time job just to get your capture rates at a baseline level, let alone improve your overall performance. And then in many cases, you can actually have IT spending so much time doing server and hardware updates, especially when you don't have a cloud solution, that you're sitting there dealing with keeping this OCR system up to date that's not even necessarily connected to your accounts payable system. And then we have even had some customers that we have spoken to or have come to us that have had to stop processing invoices because they've hit concurrent limits on users out there, like a concurrent user limit. And that can be a real problem. So when you think about an OCR system being disconnected from an accounts payable system, there can be a lot of issues with things like logins, going into capture information. It can be more difficult and cumbersome than you might want to have. So people ask us all the time, do you at Medius support e-invoicing? And then they'll also ask, are you country compliant? And I think when they're asking us these questions, there's a lot more behind it. Like, what are they really trying to find out? So when you talk about electronic invoicing, people really want to know, well, if it's electronic, do I still have to touch the invoice? And in a lot of cases, you still are probably going to have to touch that invoice. You're still going to have to look at the invoice. You're going to have to make sure that the information has come over properly. People are moving more towards like a straight through processing method now, though. Can I have invoices come through and everything matches automatically and it's streamlined? We had a question come through that just asked about things like artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that's going to change AP processing. That's a great way that that's happening now. Things like machine learning, which is kind of a subset of AI, can go through, and if you go through and tag something with a supplier, like this is where the purchase order number is, or yes, there's not a space between PO and number here, or invoice and number, and tell the system once, that's where something like machine learning can take the actions of a user and then remember that so that the next time it comes through, so you can move more to a seamless and touchless process. And that's where e-invoicing can be really great, because your suppliers aren't always going to, no matter how often you want them to put it in the right format, especially when you're working through van operators, have them go back and fix their invoices each time. It doesn't happen, but electronic invoicing that can take all this data electronically, streamline it through, and have you not have to touch that each time can be really valuable. And then you start getting more value from your data, because it's not important just to see how many invoices are coming through. You want to kind of go back to that procurement point of view. Who am I spending money with? On what kinds of categories am I spending? What parts of my organization are spending this money? That's where I can start to get some real value to save the money I need. Now, another one people ask about is, are you country compliant? And this is a big one that has to deal with when we're working with international suppliers, or we're working in international subsidiaries that we have. There are a lot of great requirements that we might not think in North America are as key, but definitely in Europe and Mexico around having country-specific tax authority compliance. So ensuring that the right tax is on an invoice, making sure that that tax is being recorded and then paid back to the supplier, and that that's being routed to a tax authority. And that's really key, especially in countries where they're wanting to make sure to capture their tax value and get as much as they can from that tax base that's there. And then we're also asked, are their invoices actually stored in a legal archive so they can be managed and handled, and that I can actually report on that appropriately back to those tax authorities when I need to. So we like to say, yes, there are all these questions that you're asking, but what you really want to know is if overall this is going to make you more efficient with what you're trying to actually accomplish. Now, at Medius, we like to say we love all invoices. We have a single input channel for all of your invoices to come through. So anything I had mentioned on a previous page, if you have PDFs, if you're still manually entering them, if you're using electronic invoices, we have ability for you to connect to a network, to connect directly to us. We can ensure that it's country compliant. And we have our own embedded intelligent capture solution. So you don't have to actually work with a third party to ensure that once the information comes in, it is there. We use machine learning to prevent all of those repetitive fixes so that once it's fixed, it's taken care of and it doesn't need to be done again. There is a single UI to actually manage all of these invoices. So from a user perspective, they don't need to know if this was an EDI invoice or came in as a PDF attachment. They look the same, which means you don't have to go through and look through code if there's an issue going on. It's the same simple UI for all of your users to be able to see invoices, and for approvers if they need to approve an invoice. It's easy for them to look at. So once an invoice is in your system, it's then talking about AP automation. And this is one of the favorite questions we get a lot. What about a workflow versus a specialized solution like a Medius tool that we have? So when you have a generic workflow, it's great because you have all the flexibility that you would want. You can customize your workflow to get you from point A to point B. And from a workflow standpoint, that's really in my system, approved, ready to pay. One thing that's nice about packaged solutions is we actually already know all of those workflows that you would be using in terms of how an invoice would be matched, who it needs to be routed to, what kind of additional checks might need to occur depending on the invoice type. Is it matched to a purchase order? Is it just an expense type of invoice? Are you setting up specific invoice types for, say, recurring transactions? Those kinds of things are built into specialized solutions. And people in finance know those kinds of intricacies that exist that a workflow developer isn't going to always need or isn't going to always know. So that's our second point here, that you don't want to have someone within your organization who's an IT developer or someone who's working specifically on maintaining your ERP have to actually manage your ongoing implementation and then your ongoing maintenance for that. I mean, that's a lot of work to have someone that's just going through and doing fixes as need be, especially if it's built on another solution that might have its own upgrades going on. When you have something like a prepackaged and fully managed integration, it takes that burden off of IT, especially when they are cloud-based solutions. It's something that can just automatically connect to your ERP as part of an implementation. And then the cloud package can actually be aware of any updates within your ERP as we've worked with partners on that. Like if you're a Dynamics or an SAP ERP solution, it can automatically know when those upgrades are happening and connect to it as appropriate. We also know that customizations within workflow really create delay and scope creep or scope spread. So sometimes if you give people a blank page, they'll start coming up with all sorts of interesting ways and workflows that they want to have created for your custom solution. But with packaged solutions, you usually know exactly what should be done, and we can provide people out of the box options for what needs to happen. And again, customizations can also really restrict your agility for moving forward in the future. If you are always reliant on customizations that have occurred, it means you don't have the ability to try new things. True cloud products are actually constantly doing those kind of customizations on their own. In order for an AP automation tool to be competitive, we're constantly adapting and adding in new features and functionality just to stay up with and ahead of the market. So continuous updates are key. You don't want to have something new you want to have done, and you can't do it because it requires customizations and work from your own department back on your own system. What I like to say about Medius is we're designed for AP and built for the cloud. It's great. We're built on the Microsoft Azure platform. It's secure and scalable. You can start small, you can start local and grow very easily as you need to. We have monthly releases with new functionality that's pushed out automatically to our users. They don't even know often when new things have come up. They might find out about it through monthly updates or information that they receive from us, or just as something new comes up and they can check out more details about it through our success portal, which I'll mention here. And at our success portal that you can go check out at success.medius.com, you can actually see a list of all of our ERP connectors that we have. They're out of the box that will help you connect automatically. But we also have our partner here to talk to you about cases where if it's not an ERP connector that we use, we have a common REST API that is available that can be done, that you can go ahead to determine what information needs to be captured and sent back and forth between the two organizations. But it is open and transparent. And on the right-hand side here, I had a kind of a list scrolling of features and functionality that had come out within just the last few months with our releases. And one of these here is Hungarian language support, which my colleague laughs at that I'm not like highlighting something really fun and exciting. But what we do is we actually listen to our customers. We have roadmap voting. People can tell us when they need to know something, and we put it in. We build it for them. We're very proactive and reactive with our customers for things that they're looking at. But we do the cool stuff too. So again, as someone had asked about, using AI, we actually use something called automatic coding suggestions. So this is available within the module. So if you have invoices that come in that aren't matched to orders, that have some coding associated with them, we can go through and automatically apply that coding for you. It actually takes the input based on, it's not going to start on day one. It needs to get some historical data out there. but our coding suggestions are about 99% accurate when they're suggested to our customers. And we can tell that because currently today, we actually allow our customers to apply these automatic coding suggestions. And we find that they're not always doing it. And it's because they're a little afraid of the system just doing this automatically. But we're actually able to go in and tell that even if they're not applying the coding suggestions, they still are accurate and match exactly what they would have put in the system. So one of the things we're actually thinking about is instead of a turn on, maybe a turn off, because we want people to start taking advantage of new technologies like AI. Like I personally think that in the future, we're not going to be highlighting things like machine learning. It's just going to be as simple as the internet one day. We see this in our lives already. The last part here is talking about electronic payments. Now, again, today's payment process is pretty outdated, really, and cumbersome. After you've gotten all of your invoices through payables, they've been received in, they've been captured, they've been processed, we then send them to our ERP to be processed. And there are many different payment types. From a survey last year, I believe that some organizations use on average about 11 different payment types that are available that go through their system, from printed checks through different banks to ACH payments, and even using cards like virtual cards or credit card processes to pay people. But each one of these processes requires a different set of processes and configurations to occur. They also often require files to be shared and sent around to different parts of the organization or to different banks. And it's an area that's really ripe for fraud. Once those payments have gone out, there's a lot of time spent fielding different vendor questions. So have I been paid on time? What's happening here? What's going on with it? And then you have to send your AP group or your buyer, because I used to spend a lot of time answering questions about have I gotten paid, actually responding to those questions. Then there's a whole reconciliation process and reconciling back by payment types that exist. Also, within the US, it's amazing to me that checks are actually still the most common payment method that are used. And it's easy to see. I mean, it's because it's familiar. Everybody knows how to easily write a check. I still joke that my mother likes to write checks at the supermarket. I cannot get her to move to a debit card yet. But for many people and many organizations, especially smaller ones moving up, it was an easy thing to do. It was low tech, didn't require a lot of work. And you have this sense you're in control when you can actually write a check. You feel like you're in charge of that process. It's easy to send it. They're accepted everywhere. You can get them out. But the reality is that it costs, on average, $7.78 for each check that's processed. And it really is the worst way to pay your suppliers. It takes a lot of time. It ends up being really expensive. It's inefficient, and it really is open to error and fraud for your suppliers and for you. So what we think it should look more like is a very simple, streamlined process where you can say your invoices are ready to be paid. There would be an approval process for that can occur. And there can still be different types of approvals based on suppliers, based on volume, based on value. But then just sending that information off and having a provider take care of that for you and pay the supplier in the manner that's most efficient to them can really work. Then they can take care of the reconciliation for you as well. So again, going back to the Ardent report, this is one from 2020, but I really loved how they said, a holistic approach of AP automation that covers the 3 phases of the ePayables framework, receive, process, and pay, can effectively cut processing costs by up to 85%. I mean, that's huge. And that's something we should all be looking at on how we can get there. But it's important to remember that true AP automation isn't just about scanning or saying I'm going to mandate e-invoicing, or that it's a no PO, no pay policy, or I'm going to build really cool custom workflows for everything I'm doing, or I have a supplier portal that I'm going to manage it all in. It's really about looking at things in a holistic manner. So what can I put into my system? What processes can I have in place? Do I have systems that can actually handle that? And that should really be all part of an overall digital transformation program that you're looking at. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anil to have this part of the conversation.
Thank you, Shannon.
Here we go.
Yeah. So before we deep dive into the topics, I would like to take a minute to tell who we are. We are a 21-year-old technology services provider focused in design and implementation of enterprise software solution. Our specialization includes hyper automation, which includes technologies like robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, low-code application development. So as you see here, we have been around, have seen many cycles, and have been delivering value to our customers across the globe. So talking about digital transformation, the way we approach digital transformation is more around building a system of engagement and system of intelligence. As you could see, the system of record is basically the core system, be it your ERP or CRM, whereas your system of engagement is systems that can influence and optimize the customer experience. And the system of intelligence is basically you could derive actionable customer insights real time. So what was happening historically is organizations were focusing more around the core system, which is critical. But in the digital transformation era, it's time that organizations start thinking to build an intuitive system of engagement and system of intelligence. Changepond, with help of partners like Medius, are helping customers in building these systems. So what we have seen is these systems help organizations to intelligently engage with their stakeholders, be it their customers, be it their partners, suppliers, vendors. So there's an intelligent way of engagement. And this is how an organization defines the digital transformation and they see success. We have also realized that any strategy on digital transformation and digital differentiation, which involves touching your system of records, should be avoided. The reason being, the system of engagement and system of intelligence would become the foundation of implementing a sustainable strategic digital differentiation. And how we approach digital transformation is using these technologies that's mentioned below. RPA, AI, low code, all these in combination helps a customer achieving a digital transformation. So what we have seen is Shannon had touched about the Medius and how the whole AP automation is made easy with Medius. Changepond being an implementation for Medius, we implement Medius platform for customers. So apart from our implementation, what we have also seen is there are processes around AP which can be automated. So say for example, self-service chatbots. So self-service chatbots have become a game changer in the procure-to-pay departments. I think of an endless possibilities where you could complete tasks by just chatting to a bot. So a couple of examples from procure-to-pay are now if you want to reorder supplies, you could just tell the bot and the bot can reorder for you. Similarly, if you want to look out an invoice, how much has the contractor billed you, you could just ask the chatbot and it can scan through the system, provide the information instantaneously. So you could see the possibilities around this space is endless. Similarly, as Shannon touched about ERP connectors, so Medius has a library of ERP connectors, but organizations which use ERPs, which is not part of the library, what Changepond does is Changepond builds ERP connectors for them and make the entire accounts payable seamless. So I think the important aspect is not only look at AP automation alone. I think you really need to look at a holistic approach of automating the surrounding process of accounts payable as well. Next slide. I'd like to end with this slide where you'll have to look digital transformation more from a user perspective. I think user needs to be at the center, and it's not about technology. So I think the customers that we have helped on digital transformation, they have a common theme. I think the entire digital transformation is centered around people and not about technology.
Thank you so much, Anil. So we're going to jump into some questions. We had some great ones pop into the chat, and I'm kind of just going to throw them out and both Anil and Shannon can answer them for us and have any necessary conversation surrounding them. So question one that came in, you alluded to it earlier, Shannon, was how will artificial intelligence and machine learning change AP processing solutions in the future?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think that we need to look at AI and machine learning, and we talk about robotics as well, about what's the business problem it's really trying to solve for you. Again, trying to implement something just to have it, I think is a bit of a waste of time. We see a lot of ads that are like machine learning, but machine learning is really something that should be done to make your life easier. Machine learning is great to remove repetitive tasks. So within Medius, in terms of our capture solution, that is part of our solution, can automatically learn any changes that people make, so that if I have a user who's done something once or twice, it can start to look out and see historically what's happened in the past and automatically do it in the future. So again, to understand what elements are on an invoice are really key, as well as things like coding suggestions that can automatically say what has happened or where something should be coded, as well as who I should be forwarding something to for approval. I mean, again, anything that's a repetitive task that I don't want to have someone to have to use brain power on because they've already used their brain power before is a great way of being able to use that in the future. And it's being used now, but we'll just continue to expand on.
Awesome, thank you. And then we have another question here about time to value and implementation time. So from the beginning of the project to the end of the project, what is the implementation time for setting up Medius?
So if it's one of our pre-built connectors, it's usually, we've had implementations as easy as 3 weeks. That's a really quick and easy one, but I'd say 8 to 12 for our standard connectors. Anil, what about you guys if you were having to build something for people?
Yeah, I think for establishing a connector, it would be an additional 4 weeks. So basically 8 to 12 weeks for a standard thing, and then an additional 4 weeks is an end-to-end implementation time that we look at.
Yeah. But I actually think about that in terms of if you're implementing a much larger ERP system, which is usually a 12 to 18 month implementation, getting something like AP automation in within a couple of months is pretty amazing.
Awesome. Wonderful. And then more of a question for you, Anil, I think is if we have to develop chatbots, what's the approach that we should take?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, right, I think you really need to understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So for one of the instances that we have talked about self-service chatbots, I think you really need to have the objective defined clearly, and the self-service chatbots that we have developed around APs basically solving or making the AP users' life easy, right? So it depends upon the requirement, and you could go ahead and develop the chatbot. So the self-service chatbot that we just touched does make the AP users' life easy. So it can fetch information from the system, put it onto your screen. The users need not scan through the systems, kind of stuff, right? So, but again, chatbots can be deployed to various other sectors as well. So it depends upon the objective, and then we would choose an appropriate methodology to deploy this.
So thank you for that. And I think we have time for one more. So I'm going to go to this one. What are your thoughts on RPA and when to use automated business processes versus a purpose-built solution like this? And then are there opportunities to supplement with RPA?
Yeah, so I think RPA, as Shannon just briefly touched, right? I think wherever you have these repeatable task kind of activities, I think RPA is the best bet. But when we are talking about a process like AP, while a certain extent can be done through RPA, but when we talk about an entire process of AP which deals with invoice matching, your two-way matching, three-way matching, I think the complexity increases, right? I think those are the instances where you really need to keep RPA away and take a platform-based approach. Now, I think you could just go with Medius, which comes in with inbuilt technology of AI and other things. And RPA can sit on top of Medius and can probably pull information, help you out. But I think thinking of automating AP entirely on RPA might be a tricky one.
Awesome. Well, thank you to you both. That was an awesome presentation. If anyone in the audience would like to learn more, please reach out to the Changepond team. And they'll be able to get you connected with us over here at Medius. So again, thank you, and that'll be it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you can visit changepond.com too. I had that on there and I somehow lost it. So somehow my My own AI didn't pick up on this one, so I messed that one off. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys. Feel free to drop either of us a line.
Thank you.
Thanks.